So Cornel West picks Peter Daou to be his campaign manager. I'll read the tweet. I am so very blessed to have my dear brother Peter Daou as my campaign manager. I welcome him to our campaign and movement. We will work together for truth and justice. And then it just goes into just the same thing, welcome in, and some news clippings and all of that. And needless to say, there's been good and bad reaction to this. It's about at 2,500 likes right now, but I'm telling you, when you look through here, there's about half that's good. There's about half that's not so good. And I do want to start with mine. I'm officially out of the Cornel West camp because to me, this is a bridge too far. This would be like hiring a former fossil fuel CEO to lead a climate change initiative. Not doing it. I don't care how much rebranding. I'm a different person. That's fine that you're different. That does not mean you should be leading anything at all. It's fine that you're different. So for me, I'm out of the camp. That means campaign. That doesn't mean I'm not part of sort of building a movement. I'm part of the movement. But as far as who I'm voting for, who I should say you be voting for, is I can't with good conscience say, hey, go do this with Cornel West when I can see this person like with power. It's not like he's just in the background. A person with power, I can't do that. So for me, I'm gonna be supporting the socialist candidate. But again, this is just the candidacy I'm not supporting. If there's any sort of movement that evolves from this after November 2024, when the campaign manager is not a thing, then of course I will be there right in the movement. I will be right there starting and continuing this movement. But as far as campaigning or anything like that, there's just no way. This is akin to Nick Brana to me. And then I'll let both of you, if you want to chime in, and then I have just one thing to show before we can move on. If either of you wanted to just I don't want what I have to say to color anybody in the audience, anybody like you like.
Hell no, Jay just tweeted that out, so y'all cannot respond.
Yeah,
Phil, just with my massive influence, I'm just gonna put this tweet out, and if y'all do what you will.
Yeah, it's at 900 now. I gotta say, I didn't think it would be at 900. I thought that I was in the minority. I thought I was in the minority.
Yeah, CJ, what that said, that's to the point I have, right? Because Dr. Cornel was in a Jimmy interview talking about how he like, no one advises me. This is my opinion. And
yeah, he did just say that actually.
He said what?
He did say that during the
okay, yeah. So he said I'm not, no one advises me, I'm doing my own thing. In that same interview, Dr. Cornel West rebuked me 2 times on the issue I believe he's 100% wrong. We talked to him multiple times. We explained our minds on lesser to evilism, still rebuked us. So I am imploring Dr. Cornel West to take ego out of this, because you need to start listening to some advice. If you guys think what CJ said is too harsh, I trust and believe me. If you look at that thread, if you look at the reaction on Twitter, CJ is far from the minority. So if your goal is to grow a movement, your goal is to grow a campaign, why would you make a move that is so controversial like hiring Peter Daou? Now, me and Peter Daou, we follow each other. We've been friendly to each other.
Because we follow each other.
I believe in redemption in a way, because I'm an abolitionist. And so there's a core of me that believe in redemption. But with that said, your point is fantastic. Just because you've been redeemed, and I don't have this rabid hatred of Peter Daou because I wasn't on Twitter before. He had like these notorious Twitter stories, so I didn't experience that. The only Peter Daou I know is the Peter Daou that swear he changed. So I'm like, okay, I believe in redemption, blah blah blah. But there's a difference between that and putting that guy as one of the leaders of the movement. You know what I mean?
Right. Exactly.
And that's why I wish Dr. Cornel West could advise, put your ego aside and ask for advice. There are people saying, Nick, you think you're upset because Dr. Cornel West didn't listen to you because he don't agree with you? Yes, we have the right. We have that right. I have the right to have an opinion and be upset if you don't agree with that opinion, especially if you're someone who claim to represent us. So this is why I argue for a leaderless movement. Because if you have a movement that is so centered around the leader, the whole movement collapses and the leader have a lapse of judgment. So I've been very upset, been very heartbroken, honestly, guys, the last few days, seeing electoral politics destroy this movement. Because I don't even take electoral politics that serious in the first place, in general. But it's been heartbreaking to see just one guy make missteps and then all of a sudden a third-party movement destroyed. That's the problem with having a movement that's centered on the leader. And I'll pass you, Niko. I know you want to chime in, but that's why I said a long time ago. Like, I remember, CJ, what we said when we first covered Dr. Cornel West. I'm not endorsing nobody. I'm not. There's no benefit in advance to me to do that. If whether I support you or not is one thing or another, but whether Dr. Cornel West is still on the ballot or not in November, nothing changes for me. Like, I have a goal of growing a Kansas City mutual aid organization, and I'm like stressed, like how the fuck I'm gonna pull that off. You know what I mean? So nothing changes for me, and I want you guys to understand that nothing should change for you, no matter what happens with Dr. Cornel West. I view that the Green Party and the Dr. Cornel West candidacy as a vehicle for the change in this movement, right? So no matter what happens, no matter what disappointment you guys have, like CJ said, we all should be working towards building a movement. But that's why it's also on Dr. Cornel West to not alienate people by having people like Peter Daou as leadership. And that's something that could be easily solved if he just advised literally anybody. You know what I mean? Like,
anybody on the ground.
His thing is, I'm a mark forward, and you guys gonna set what I say. I don't care if you guys got criticism. And that's how it felt to me, especially when we had him on 3 times. I explained in very logical fashion 3 times. Sabby explained to him very logically recently ago. Then he go on Jimmy and make a fucking ass of himself because he didn't want to listen to our argument.
That's that Harvard degree speaking. That's that Harvard. I got a Harvard degree. You ain't, telling me what to do. So my position, CJ laid his position out. We're not a monolith here. I still think Dr. Cornel West in his campaign has movement building potential, but these missteps are going to hurt him. And I'm not here to save Captain Save a Politician. I'm not here to campaign for any motherfucker. So if someone say, man, I don't like Dr. Cornel West because he said make that decision, I'm like, damn, Dr. Cornel West, you really fucked up there. You know what I mean? I'm not here to do that. So, Niko, I'm sorry I went around. I want to get you in. What's your thought?
So my initial thoughts were, I was like, so I took a little hiatus from Twitter for a year or so before I came back several months ago. And I was a little bit confused by the extreme reaction in one way or another, right? Because I was there. I remember Peter Douche, as it were, right? I remember who he was during the 2016 campaign. He and I had gotten into it several times during the 2016 campaign. I also remember him, quote unquote, seeing the light. And I do believe that there's room for that to happen. I've actually seen people evolve. Like, maybe they weren't as extreme as Peter Daou, but like I've seen former Bernie, quote unquote, Bernie supporters go into the dark side, like, and everybody defended them just because they were Bernie supporters. But just like I've seen people who weren't Bernie supporters actually become more progressive and more open-minded and more leftist. So like, I believe people have room to evolve. Right now, there's like what's right and what's wrong, and then there's just pure strategy. I agree with Jay and both of you. Like, just because somebody has been redeemed or is on the path to redemption does not mean you make them leader of your campaign. Because at the bare minimum, it takes Daou, it takes him too long to see what's coming, right? It takes him a while to read the room. And if it takes you too long to read the room when you're in the middle of a presidential campaign, especially as a third-party candidate, then you are screwed. One thing that I loved about Dr. Jill Stein's campaign in 2016, I don't know who her manager was. I guess somebody said it was Howie Hawkins at some point. You couldn't tell because she was ahead of the curve on everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's not Howie. Right, we know that. So really, my opinion about the situation has nothing to do with that's necessarily my opinion of Dr. West as a person or with Peter Daou as a person. At the same time, bro, it's like strategy, right? If you bringing somebody on your campaign causes this much backlash, and you have to now reassess and figure out and remember, okay, what are my goals? What is the goal of this campaign? Mm-hmm. I had this conversation with Dr. West about his conversation with Jimmy. I had this conversation with Jimmy offline. I'm gonna have it with him during the interview. Like, what are your goals when y'all talking to each other? I said, I know you had one goal. He had another goal. Clearly, y'all had your goals at that moment didn't align. But like, what is it about? Is it about proving that Biden's a bigger fascist, or is it about this coalition that we're trying to build? Because as much as I would like to be like, oh yeah, Dr. West has a legitimate chance, he's running in the Green Party. 2, He's a black man that isn't tap dancing for the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. So like that's a reality that we have to deal with, and we know what the likely conclusion would be until we've seen proven otherwise. So what is your goals? I don't believe that Jimmy and Dr. West remembered their goals during that conversation, and that was my biggest gripe. I don't know if Dr. West is acknowledging his goals by bringing on Daou and then maybe shutting down. I don't know what we'll find out, I guess, how he reacts to it. But you can't bring Daou on and then like have that reaction, and in my opinion, not do anything about it. Maybe you can have him as an advisor, but managing your campaign, now you got to read the room again. And if Daou sees this and how it's going, like maybe he should just take it upon himself, if he's really redeemed, to step down from that position.
Right.
You know, because at the end of the day, it's about your goal. Is your goal building up this coalition, or is it to fracture it even further? And if you see a move that's made that elicits such an extreme reaction in one form or another, almost 50, because like you said, it was about 50-50.
50-50, yeah.
Green Party ain't got 50-50 numbers to be playing with. Like
Nope.
They do nothing.
When you have a third party left candidate, and I'm talking about we're trying to do something that's never been done before, you need to have a candidate that sounds fundamentally and utterly different than Democrats, Republicans, and two-party duopoly. I mean, you need to say stuff that has CNN and MSNBC like, what? Like, you guys remember when I was on the Hill and like Robbie's like, what? Like whenever I go on these appearances, people are like, what? Like that's your language, the way you talk, the issues you prioritize should be way different than any Democrat, any different. So like when you talk about Biden,
I like the way I love the way you said the prioritization of the issues. That is what is extremely important. Because shock value matters when you're a third party candidate, bro. Like it does. We don't. Should it? I don't know. Maybe not. But when you go up there and you're saying, even so, for the difference is, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but the difference between Jimmy Dore says one of his criticisms was like, oh, it's ID Paul. Now I disagree with Jimmy that every conversation about race has to do with ID Paul, and I feel like that is a fault. It's false equivalency. But I understand why he says it, right? But my thing is, what Dr. West has to also understand, even though Jimmy maybe not have conveyed it the best, but what he has to understand is, okay, so you're going to say the same thing that Kamala's going to get up there and say, like, what's the difference? Why don't they just vote for Kamala? And what we're going to say, well, or what they're going to say is, well, what about our policies? Whatever. What about blah, blah, blah? Yeah, that's too much for most Americans to get around, right? Like, you're not saying anything different. What would be nice of you to say is, it's funny to me how why everybody wants to talk about Trump's racism and acknowledge that, but ignore the 40 years of Biden's policy-driven racism, not just racism, but racism. We can look at the section of the legislation and point to what's clearly racist. The comments that's something that would bring most Americans back. Like, hold up, I didn't even know about this, because they be deleting shit and they be scrubbing.
Asset forfeiture is one big one. Asset forfeiture. He's on video. I think Nick's played this. He's on video proudly talking about how we're just going to take everybody. They take their money. It's confiscated. Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, I talked to Jimmy a bit after the interview, and he said that was a lot of the frustration was that when he talked about white supremacy, he sounds just like a Democrat. Like, for example, like Jimmy and many of the people that are on the right or independent right that watch RBN, do you guys get mad at us? Because we say that Joe Biden is one of the most anti-black politicians in the modern era. We talk about the crime bill, how anti-black it was, how U.S. foreign policy harms black and brown life. That's technically identity politics. Like if you talk about Palestinian rights, like isn't Palestinian rights technically identity politics? But it doesn't make you roll your eyes because it's an important issue, right? So when we talk about identity politics, when I talk about identity politics, there's so many right wingers who don't roll their eyes because they see that I'm coming from it from a material angle with no contradictions. So yes, I think Donald Trump enables white supremacy, but also going to call out Joe Biden for being one of the biggest enablers of white supremacy in the modern era.
But that's what gives you legitimacy. That's what gives you legitimacy is because you're saying both, Nick. Yeah. And that's what we keep trying to get Cornel West to understand. Go ahead, Niko.
No, I was going to say along those lines, like Dr. West attacked Tucker as a white supremacist and talked about how problematic his reporting has been on certain issues, which is true, right? Like he might be good on some issues, especially challenging the government, maybe even foreign policy in a lot of ways. But like Tucker does have problematic reporting, but you can't then sit in front of fucking Anderson Cooper and be like, you're doing a good job, son. You can't do that. Cause now I'm like, this comes off to me. So just because he's being nice to you, that is how you determine who you're going to treat with respect, or who you're going to allow to have redemption, or who you're going to reach out to and work with and coalesce with. That's not how you got to, like, when you're running for president and when you're trying to be a president, that can't be how you do business. Because that means that you're a lot of how you interact with people. I'm not saying this is the case for him, but that is what it has meant traditionally, is a lot of how you interact with people depends on how they stroke your ego. And that's dangerous. Because they say some nice things, and but also you ignore the other shit that because Anderson Cooper was probably CNN was problematically reporting a lot of those George Floyd and Eric Garner protests. Like CNN was saying that Russian propagandists were propping up the protests. People forget about that. Like that happened, and so you can't be like Tucker Carlson's a white supremacist and he's problematic and and then ignore what we've historically seen from Anderson Cooper. Like even regarding the campaigns that Dr. West has been a part of.
This is Claudia. You can go to her website, Claudia De La Cruz. She's part of PSL, Party for Socialism and Liberation. They're in the ballot in California, but that's true. That is true. And
that's my frustration.
This is what struck me.
Look
at their program right here. In capitalism, before it ends us, seize the biggest 100 companies, create a new economy for the people, overthrow the dictatorship of the rich, build a democracy that deserves the
working class. Jesus Christ! I skipped ahead. Look.
It's great. My bad. No, go. I see what you say.
Well, you see the ones that cut military budget by 90%. That one got me to react. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I skipped a little bit ahead. I like, see, that's the base that shit we talking about, fam. Not that Bernie Sanders.
Can I address something real quick now before we go to the next? I want to say something. Okay. For people who keep saying Jimmy Dore's racist, I need you to like cut that bullshit out because he's not, right? I've been one of the first people to say, can Jimmy have blind spots when it comes to race because he is a white man? Yeah, because he's a white dude. Like 95% of white dudes have blind spots when it comes to race. Like that's reality. Like I've had conversations. I've been in the military. I grew up in North Carolina. Like I've had conversations with people I'm still really close with today. I'm like, hey, bro, you gotta chill. That's a little bit suspect, you know. That doesn't mean it's racist. It just means that if you are not like we are, well, because of how we grew up, we're black men, so we are more sensitive to those conversations and to when something maybe, I guess what people would once call microaggressions or whatever, like we're more sensitive and we're more aware of when it's happening than what they would be because they never really have to be in a situation where they're more accountable for it a lot of the time. Yeah. But like correcting somebody, hey man, like maybe next time you should handle it like this because of this is the experiences that black men have. Because when I told Jimmy, I was like, yo, you say you're gonna coach somebody, like you can't say that. Like you can't say that to a black man, like unless you're gonna say that to RFK Jr. too, unless you're gonna say that to, you know, Ro Khanna too, unless you're gonna say that to Tulsi too, like you gotta say it to all of them. You can't be like, I'm just trying to educate you and coach you. Because even me, if somebody said that to me, bro, I'm like, excuse me? That's the first thing. I don't know. I don't hear anything else you said after that. Because like you educated me. You know what I'm saying? But that's reality because whenever someone has said that to me, like Jimmy might have been well-meaning, but I've had people say it to me that were not well-meaning and I knew it. And it's hard to discern between those two when you're, especially when emotions are high, and I feel like there's a level of desperation amongst the country and amongst the world, amongst movements and leftists all over. Like, you got to be careful. But like, that doesn't mean he's fucking racist, bro. Like, just because somebody messes up in a way that you don't like does not mean they're racist. And that is the shit that makes others not want to get involved with this type of conversation at all. They don't want to get involved at all because they're scared if they make a mistake, then they're going to be labeled racist. They're going to be labeled sexist. They're going to be labeled trans, whatever. Like, there's a level. The problem, there's so many, we have to understand, we are literally living in a country where people are the least educated on race on purpose. Do you understand that? On purpose. Most propaganda.
White people, this is what I was just about to say, you know, all the propaganda about race, that there's no racism, that's not for us. We experience it. That's the propagandized white people. The point of white supremacy propaganda is to get white people on the side, not to get us. They can't tell us anything about police. We experience it. They can't tell us, but they can tell a white person who doesn't deal with the police, this is what the police are for. Exactly. You get what I'm saying? So that's the point. I don't want to go off the rails unless Nick, you have something.
But
I'll finish this list and we can move on.
But but you're 100% right, and like I just wanted to go ahead and clarify that because like I've had personal experiences with Jimmy that people don't know about, like how I was being shut out of the conversation about the DNC fraud lawsuit was my fucking lawsuit, and people were doing it on purpose because I was also an up and coming journalist, and no one wanted to have like because before RBN, I know some of y'all might not know this, but most of these YouTube motherfuckers just would sit on there and talk their ass off and never be in the streets doing anything whatsoever. Yep. Like, and I was one of the few who were actually like walking the walk and talking the talk. And that's
Niko was one of the first people that platformed me, by the way. Just add it in. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, girl, I remember. It was
really probably like the first 2 or 3 people. That was like that's all my crazy ass. Like, let me bring him on the show. Go ahead, Niko.
But like Jimmy, when he heard the story how I was being frozen out of that conversation, got me to New York in studio, and he had me on to talk about all of it so that I could get the credit I deserve. And I can tell you 95% of these motherfucking white quote unquote progressive journalists would never. They would never give me.
I see that now with RBN. How many people in white independent media promoted the General Strike Summit? Jimmy Dore had me on so we could promote it. He had Savvy Savs on so she could promote her Woman Summit and her Boston action. Like, Jimmy promotes action. Like, so there's disagreements that we have, but he's just promoting our action while TYT and you gotta see CJ, you did a segment on it. Like Cal, all the people doing a segment about the media bias chart, they won't even say our name, fam. they won't even say our fucking name. But Jimmy will have us on to so we can share our black radical ass politics, right? So once again, there's levels to this shit. Like when you guys say that Jimmy Dore is racist, like you guys, like Niko said, delegitimize the real struggle for racial equality because
Jimmy's not the enemy of racism. I promise you. I promise you. Like he's not
Jimmy's a racist. What is Biden? You know what I mean?
The one you vote for.
If Jimmy's a racist, what is the Klan? Like you guys literally undermine. And I did many segments about liberal identity politics where you guys drive me crazy because you undermine the struggle that I care about. I care about calling out racial inequality, and I care about calling out white America for their contradictions. But calling Jimmy, who calls out the military-industrial complex, he's like the only guy that does anti-cop video who's white on YouTube.
That is very true. That is one person that bro. Even among
we got to get to the video.
Yeah, we got on the video.
All right, so cut the military budget by 90% and then end the war on Black America, defend women's right, full equality for LGBT, and save the planet from capitalism. That is their platform. Unless in Ethereum we can get to the video. I'm gonna do more on Claudia, and I'm gonna actually, of course, we're gonna reach out and have them on the show, of course, because a lot of people have been asking us, and of course, we're gonna have the socialist candidate on RBN. We just have not scheduled it or anything like that yet.